Hi there. One of the challenges about being able to time shift these lessons, and I think that's a great convenience whenever you have time during the week. Doesn't have to be on Wednesday night. You can just take some time, go through these things, think through these, have discussions with your family, etc. One of the challenges of that, knowing that your time shifting, is how to greet you. Do I say good day, good evening, good afternoon? And I'll just say good whatever, although that sounds to be a little dismissive, but I hope you're having a good day, or will have a good day, or have had a good day, or at least tomorrow will be good. But enjoy these times that we have together. One of the challenges in presenting things weekly, especially like if you're a preacher and you preach twice on Sunday, and you teach a Wednesday night class, and you teach a Sunday morning class, and a ladies class, and all of those things that traditionally ministers have done, is the challenge of presenting something that is complete each time. When you only have a week to prepare for several different classes, what you need to prepare is, or what you need to present is a complete lesson, a complete set of thoughts, etc. To do that 4 or 5 times a week, one or two things can happen. One is you become fairly shallow because you just don't have time to explore in depth. And the other is to kind of, for lack of a better word, plagiarize other people, read somebody's book or somebody's sermon outline book or something, and just take what they had, and rather than it being a product of your own study and development, you just kind of rehash somebody else's thing. This discussion that we've had through our Wednesday night series has been challenging to me, because it's really forced me to go back and look at some things, reconsider them in a new light. Also, just the challenge of looking at things that are not cut and dry. They're not good, evil in and of themselves. They tend more to be on a continuum. So it's forced me to look deeper, and that means that sometimes by the time rolls around to record a message, I'm not through with my thought process. Some of these things are thought processes that can take months or years. So for that reason, what I'm sharing in this session is kind of what my thoughts are right now, my thoughts to this point, subject to change, I guess, without notice. So looking at gray areas, which means we have to deal with things that are not in and of themselves obviously good or evil. Sometimes they lead that way. The example I use in your lesson sheet is that of eating food. Eating food's a great thing. But if you look at it on a continuum, you can start with eating food. It's good for health, it's good for growth, it's good for all those kinds of things. Yet you can start adding to it and adding to it and adding to it, and pretty soon you can get to gluttony, you can get to negative health as a result of what we've eaten. So something that starts out good can end up evil. And the challenge with that is, where along the way do you say, all right, this is where it made the transition from the good to evil, which I think is probably a wrong way of looking at things. Although there is a continuum there, it's more of a process than it is kind of point action. Some of the choices in sin that we get involved with are like a light switch. They're on and off. You either do it or you don't. You're either guilty or you're not. Some choices in sin are like a dimmer switch. You know, using a dimmer switch, say on lights in your house, you know when the lights are off and you know when your lights are on, but there's an infinite degree in between of dimness or brightness, etc. When does it become dim? If you start out with full light and you start turning it down, when would you say, all right, now that's dim? Or going the other way, all right, now that's bright. This is dim, this is dimmer, this is less dim. You know, there's just degrees with that. And the challenge with that is probably no two of us would agree, when does it hit dim or when does it hit bright? That leads to different convictions, and different convictions means that we have different conscience in the matter of sin. Not so much light, but in the matter of sin. When does this become evil? When is, if I'm eating for health and growth and all those kinds of things, and I add another piece of pie that I don't need, have I made a step toward gluttony? If I add 2 pieces of pie, if I add a piece of pie every day, have I made a step toward gluttony? If I add a piece of pie each day and then add a cupcake in the morning, you see, when along that have I gone from eating for health and growth to actually becoming a glutton? At what point do you say, all right, he's a glutton? Is it based on my weight? Is it based on my consumption? And also understanding that different people have different tolerances for food. Some people, I think in our nation, they recommend kind of 2,000 calories, average needs of an adult. There are people who can put on weight with 2,000 calories. There are people who can eat 4,000 calories and not put on any weight, not have any difference in their cholesterol, or those kinds of things. So the cutoff point doesn't apply to any 2 people. And that's where it's important that I know where my conviction is and that I live consistently with that conviction. Now, what comes along with that then is where and there do we go from behavior in others that we're compassionate toward them, even forgiving of them, and then we move toward becoming enabling of them. For instance, famous court cases you're familiar with that demonstrate the intersection of discipleship with an increased permissiveness in our culture. It would be a baker that refuses to bake a cake for a gay couple. Now his conscience convicts him that if I make a cake for these people, then I'm giving tacit approval to what they're doing. Someone else may say, no, you're doing a business transaction. What they do with the fruits of your transaction do not determine or reflect on you. Or the refusal of a county clerk to issue wedding license to a gay couple. Again, it's one of those issues that you may feel strongly about either way. All right, it's the state doing it. She's just an agent for the state. It's not her doing it. It's not her giving approval. Just like it's not her giving approval for a wedding license for any other kind of a situation. It's just what she has to do. And then another says, yes, but I'm doing this, so I become a part of it. And therefore, my conscience is being violated. I cannot, in good conscience, be a part of this transaction. Or if you were a landlord, would you consider renting to a cohabiting couple? Or would you consider that as enabling their sin, their lifestyle? And is the idea, if I send them on down the road, then they'll have to find somebody else who will rent a house to them so that they can live in immorality. Is that my responsibility to do? Is it my responsibility to determine their lifestyle and the acceptability of their lifestyle, and whether or not this is just a business deal? I provide housing, they provide money, or this is a business deal that has moral application needs. When does compassion become enabling? Certainly it's compassionate to make a cake for someone. It's compassionate to want to help people that are getting married, get married. It's compassionate to help someone who wants to have a home to live in. Certainly we would agree those are good things to do, but when does it become something that started out as good and it becomes at some point maybe evil? And does this lead us into becoming a Christian cancel culture? Dan did a great job Sunday talking about the cancel culture that we have and the lack of compassion and all of those things that are involved in it. And it raises the question, does sin cancel a person? Can I be in a situation where I can't associate with you or not even acknowledge you because of your sin? I've got to run from the building if you're there because of your sin. Many gray areas that are related to sin, we respond to emotionally because they're fresh, they're new. And we get irate by when something else comes down the pike about this new kind of gray area, as we did, going back to abortion, as we did going back to the opening of casinos, gay marriage, and now what's going on with just accepting of all sexual genders or proclivities, et cetera, et cetera. as we encounter new ones, they're fresh, and we get irate kind of all over again. But who do we get irate at, or what do we get irate at? I think we understand that we do not respond to everybody's sin the same way. I think we understand that we're arbitrary in some of this, and some of that has to do with the freshness of it. Some has to do with what personally repulses us. And that could be sexual lifestyle, it could be alcohol abuse, it could be a lot of different things. We understand that God doesn't categorize these things, yet we do. We understand that we treat people differently. Can I make a cake for an alcoholic? A known alcoholic that wants me to make a cake for them, probably going to make a cake for them. If they're gay, I'm not going to make a cake for them. Are my qualifications for whom I will do business with, do they vary based upon what personally repulses me? Because we know that the sins of both of them are the same in the eyes of God. Yet there are some that we don't take as personally on us in terms of do I need to do a background check on everyone that I do business with, or only on certain things? I think sometimes we get involved with a mindset of trying to disfellowship people with whom we don't have fellowship. And guys, I want you to know there is actually a dualism here. There's a double standard. Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians chapter 5, I wrote you in my letter not to associate with immoral people. I do not at all mean with the immoral people of this world, or with the covetous or swindlers or idolaters, for then you would have to go out of the world. But actually I wrote to you not to associate with any so-called brother if he should be an immoral person, covetous, idolater, or a reviler, drunkard, or swindler, nor even to eat with such a one. For what do I have to do with judging outsiders? Do you not know that those who are within the church, do you not judge those who are within the church? But those who are outside, God judges. See, we have different judge standards, but it's not different sins. It's, do I have a relationship with this person or not in Christ Jesus? I think sometimes we take 1 Corinthians 5, try to apply it to the world. I'm not going to have anything to do with you, or I'm not going to eat with you, or whatever, because I don't want you to believe that I'm condoning your sin. Now, with someone in the church, he's saying, you don't associate with them, you don't eat with them, you don't want to be a part of their immorality or even enable their immorality. But it's a double standard, and he makes that clear. I don't tell you not to associate with people in the world. I don't tell you to withhold fellowship from people in the world, and the reason is we don't have fellowship. There is no correction that we're going to do in their lives by doing that. And the idea of turning someone over to Satan, as Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians 5, is for the buffeting of their body so that their spirit will shine, that they'll come back. It's about discipline. It's not about canceling. And I think sometimes in the past we've seen church discipline as canceling people. We're going to get rid of them, where the idea is to discipline them so that they come back, so that they're saved. But you've got to have fellowship with someone before you can disfellowship, or put it another way, you've got to have fellowship before disfellowshipping is going to do anything at all. If a group that I'm not a part of says, Steve, we're not going to have you as a member, well, fine, I'm not a member to begin with. So there is a dualism here, and I think sometimes we get confused that I'm going to treat the people in the world as I would a brother who's living in sin. I'm not going to have anything to do with them. I'm going to talk to them. I'm going to kind of disfellowship them. And Paul was saying, if you do that, you can't even live with the world, because everybody you come in contact with is going to live a life against God from some perspective or another. Speaking of perspective, let's get a little perspective. I once had a discussion with a very deep thinker years ago about what is our fundamental problem with God, or his with us. What's the fundamental challenge between humans and God? Is it the particular sin? Woman caught in adultery, is that particular sin the issue God has with her? The answer is no. Is it the preponderance of sin? Is the amount of sin that I have? No. Is it the presence of sin in my life? Yes. It's the advent of sin. It's not what the sin is or how much sin there is. It's that I have sin. Romans 6:3 says the wages of sin, singular, is death. Guys, we understand that God does not differentiate sin like we do. God is not more morally repulsed by one sin than he is another. So the wages of sin is death. So it's not the specificity of my sin that causes problems between me and God. It's the fact that I have sinned, regardless of what it is, regardless of how many it is. It's not that I'm cohabiting. It's not that I am living in adultery. It's not that I have a gay partner. Those are just symptoms of the deeper problem. What's the fundamental problem? The problem is my relationship with God has been destroyed. Not by the specificity of the sin, but by the fact that I have sinned. Now, if we look at it that way, we see sin as not the problem, but the symptom of the problem. You see, I sin when I don't trust God. I sin when my love for God grows weak. I sin when I try to meet my own needs with shortcuts, when I want to feel better. Sin is the indicator of a relationship problem with God. Sin's the symptom of it. I'm distant from God, I sin. I don't pursue God, I sin. I don't trust God, I sin. I don't obey God, I sin. Lifestyle sins are symptoms of what kind of holes we're trying to fill. In other words, what kind of insecurities we're trying to deal with. So I can do all kinds of sins, but I have a lifestyle sin. This is the way I live. I live in this sin. That sin will show you what my insecurities, what the biggest hole in my life is. And by the way, that'll give you some insight into how to scratch where I itch, so to speak. That'll give you some insight into where my hurt is, where my pain is. And Jesus had the incredible ability to look inside people and see their pain. You know what went along with their pain? Their sin. The way that they were trying to cope with their pain. So lifestyle sins are symptoms of what kind of holes we live in. Okay? Or that we're trying to fill, our insecurities. But the love loss is the problem. John chapter 4, Jesus met the woman at the well, and he asked her for water. She said, "How is it that you, being a Jew, ask me for a drink since I'm a Samaritan woman? For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans." Jesus answered and said to her, "If you knew the gift of God, who it is that says to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." And he goes on, and she talks about, but you don't have anything to draw from. And he talks about the living water and all of that. The woman had said, I don't, give me this water so that I won't be thirsty and won't have to come here to draw. And he said to her, "Go call your husband and come here." And she said, "Well, I don't have a husband." He said, "You've told the truth. You've had 5 husbands. The man you're living with now is not your husband." And she was astonished. Now, what I want you to understand, what was her problem? Guys, I think if we were to meet her at the well, we would see several problems. This woman's got relationship problems. She's had 5 husbands. She's got probably a divorce problem. Now, if she doesn't have a divorce problem, somebody ought to exhume 5 bodies, because there's probably some arsenic involved there. If she lived through 5 husbands dying, and it could happen, but there's a pattern here, and Jesus has demonstrated that. She's living with a man. She's come to the well because she's either a loose woman or a rejected woman. It's dangerous to come to the well. It's dangerous to come at the time that she did. She's a Samaritan. She's got false religion. She's not serving God right. When Jesus saw her, did he see those things? Did he see her sin? Not did he see that she's a sinner. It's obvious. Everybody is. But is that what he saw? Or did he see someone who had fallen out of her relationship with God, or didn't have a relationship with God, didn't know that God loves her, that he still loves her? Did she know that? That's her problem. That's why she's trying to fill her life with what all of these things that she's trying to pursue. everything, the adult or the adulteries, if that's the situation, the living with a man in fornication, going through, I assume, some divorces, coming alone to the well, being an outcast, being a Samaritan, all of these things are symptoms. They're not the problem. The problem with God is, or the problem with her, she doesn't have a relationship with God. She's trying to fill the holes in her life with all of those things. And Jesus knew it's not going to work. It's not going to work. So lifestyle sin is an insight into that hole that she's living in. John chapter 8. This woman brought to him by scribes and the Pharisees, and they caught her in the act of adultery. Did Jesus see at first an adulteress? And they said, now in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. What do you say? They were saying this, testing him, in order that they may have grounds of accusing him. But Jesus stooped down with his finger wrote in the ground. But when they persisted in asking him, he straightened up and he said to them, he who is without sin among you, let him cast the first stone. And again he stooped down and wrote on the ground. And when they heard it, they began to go out one by one, beginning with the older one, and he was left alone with the woman. Now I want you to understand that he didn't see an adulteress. And the reason I can say that is because Jesus said, I didn't come to judge, I came to save. So I'm looking for people to save. I'm not looking for people to judge. And if you're looking for people to judge, you're looking for the basis for that judgment, and that's their sin. I believe Jesus saw a woman who had lost her love for God, if she'd ever had it. And I'm assuming because she's of the race that she had to some relationship, or to some extent a relationship with God. It may have been only legalistic through the law, but she knew enough to know God is love. And she's lost her love for God. She's lost. He saw what insecure needs she was trying to fill through her lust, pleasures of the flesh, just as the guy that she was with. He saw two people who are lost. Now, had he come to judge, he would have seen an adulteress, and he would have confronted her adultery, and he never did. What he did was said, is there nobody here to condemn you? Now, what he taught was nobody has the capability to do that. Nobody can judge her, because they have to judge themselves first. No, nobody is. Then neither do I. Now, I'm going to stop here for just a moment, because Jesus did not meet the woman at the well and said, now, I want to talk to you, but I can't talk to you because you're a Samaritan and you're a woman and you've lived with you've had 5 husbands, and the man you're living with those things get in the way of me talking to you. They get in the way of me dealing with you. It's as if Jesus had to ignore the symptoms to look into the problem. What was the problem? She didn't have any living water. That was her problem. Now, symptoms of that were her lifestyle. Did he justify her symptoms? No. But was that her problem? No. Her problem was the lack of love and submission to God. You know, folks often say to me, how do you not psychoanalyze people all the time? When you see people, how do you not look at them as a therapist or whatever? Well, I don't. First of all, it's too much work. But it's what I do. It's not who I am. It's a worldview that I put on in a therapeutic situation. It's not the worldview that I look at the world through. It's just a set of tools to help me apply to given specific situations, but I'm not trying to do that all the time. It would be exhausting to do that. So I want you to imagine, how did Jesus view humanity? Oh boy, here comes an adulterer. Oh, look over there, there's a fornicator. This guy's unmerciful. This guy's a liar. Oh, and look at that guy. He's a morally compromised businessman. Oh, here comes a gossip. Oh, my goodness. What's she going to say? Wow. There's a lot of judgmental legalists in this crowd. Or Scripture would say, and a compulsive liar called to him from the crowd. You see, Scripture doesn't even look at folks that way. Or a gay man approached him from Capernaum, saying, You see, the orientation of Scripture is not even that way. And the orientation of Jesus wasn't, I didn't come here to judge. I didn't come here. And guys, by and large, people understand the challenges they have. They expect us to judge them. I think people came to Jesus expecting him to judge. And the Pharisees and scribes brought this woman expecting him to judge. But he didn't come to judge. He came to save. And what he saw was a woman with a broken relationship with the Father that needed to be saved. That's what salvation is, repairing that relationship. I believe he saw her both times. And a woman separated from God, whom in her despair turned to adultery, was brought to Jesus. I think that's the way he looked at her. And a man who had forgotten that God loved him and was thieving. And a girl who had never learned that God loved her came to him asking. What they turned to in their sin isn't the point, but that they had turned away from God. God it's not the issue, oh, this is what he turned, this is what he... See, all sin is sin, and all sin is idolatry. It's that we turn to something else. What they turned to was the symptom of the hole they were trying to fill. The greater the hole, the deeper the pile of sin trying to crawl out, but not a difference in nature of situation. Deep hole, shallow hole, it's all a hole. One sin, 30 sins, preponderance of sin, it's all sin. But I'm no closer to God if I have less sin, because all it takes is one sin. The wages of sin, singular, is death. I think when God looks at you, he doesn't see a sinner first. He sees a child of God with whatever relationship you have or don't have with God at that point. I think when Christ first laid eyes on you, he didn't look at you as the biggest lifestyle sin that you struggle with. I don't think that cropped up first, and he couldn't see you because this sin. Guys, if someone walks into my presence who's gay, if someone walks into my presence who's heterosexual, if someone walks into my presence who is a consummate liar, if that's what I see, then I become a judge. I'm here to ferret out sin. I can't ferret out sin. I can't do a thing for sin. But I can be an ambassador to repair relationships, and through that, the sin gets taken care of. When I was young, living in Alabama, and there was a man living down the street who, an older man, had a horrible, horrible cough, and he would sit out on his porch to get air, and he would just cough and cough and cough. And it was a very liquid, turbulent cough, and my dad warned me, don't go around him. I was very young, 5 or 6, and he didn't explain why, but later we were talking about it. And the issue was the man had tuberculosis. And Dad was warning me, that's contagious. And, by the time I came around, there was a cure for it. But this older man remembered that people with tuberculosis used to be put in asylum. They used to be separated from other people because before a cure. And he was afraid of going to the doctor and being diagnosed with the disease, even though there was now a cure. There was just that aura that was around having tuberculosis. So what he did is he took very heavy codeine to deal with the cough. And he ended up dying of the disease. And my dad used that as an example to say, if he had dealt with the underlying disease, if he had gone to the doctor and gotten the medication for the disease, the cough would have taken care of itself. He wouldn't need cough medicine anymore. His body wouldn't need to cough because his body's cough was telling him, we've got problems. We can't, there's fluid. His body was screaming at him, there's trouble. If you get rid of the trouble, and what he did is suppressed the alarm. Brothers and sisters, there are people around us all over the place who have the symptoms of being covered in sin. They're dealing with their problem. What's their problem? separation from God. What's their problem? They don't love God. Or maybe they don't know that God loves them. Maybe they're rebellious because they've already written themselves off. Maybe they're living in sin because, like Aesop's fable of the sour grapes, if I can't have it, then it's not good and acceptable. And I can't have it because I'm so bad. On and on and on. Jesus came to the earth. Can you imagine how depressed Jesus would have been if all he saw was people's sin? If that's how he saw them. Oh, here comes an adulterer. I wonder what this is going to all be about, etc. What did he see? Guys, when he looked down Jerusalem, city was going to kill him, that was going to kill him. And he saw the people just, and his heart went out to them. And he wanted, like a mother hen, to just pull them in. Because he saw sheep without shepherd. What do sheep without shepherds do? They get into all kinds of problems. They get destroyed. Their wool becomes all matted. They become malnourished, on and on, diseased, everything else. And that's what Jesus saw, was a bunch of diseased, malnourished sheep. And that's the way I think he looks at humanity. And that's why I think he never got tired of people. He never got depressed around people, because he saw their separation. He could see the hole in them, or the holes in them. And he knew what would fill that hole. And he also knew that when that hole was filled, they wouldn't need to try to fill it with other things. They wouldn't need to try to fill it with lust or desire or pleasure or all of those kinds of things. Because as we know, those things don't fill them up. They give us the illusion of fill for a while, and then we have to go back to it, and we have to increase the dosage and all of those kinds of things because they don't work. And so his compassion goes out. So when someone comes to me, if the first thing I see is their sin, I become a judge. If because of their sin, whether I'm aware of it or not, because of their sin, they have an attitude, and I look through that and see the hole in them, then I've just become Christ-like. And so I'm not going to address the symptom directly. I'm going to address the problem directly. And when we address the problem, and that's what the gospel does, that's what the teachings of Scripture does, then the symptoms go away. How many folks do you know living in all kinds of sin, when they became a Christian, their lives radically changed? Because they gave up the stuff that didn't work for what did. And the symptoms started going away because the problem had been dealt with. When we confront symptoms and try to get rid of symptoms, it just creates more symptoms. If I have anxiety and I wash my hands 20 times a day, and I go to a counselor and he helps me learn how not to wash my hands, I still have the anxiety. I'm going to find something else to do. I may hit myself 20 times. I mean, it never ends in the symptoms, but you get rid of the underlying problem. And I think Jesus looked into the souls of people and saw underlying problems. So folks who are angry at God, folks who are angry at other people and violent, folks who are burning down people's businesses even as we speak, folks who are so upset about inequality and all of the things that are justified to be upset about. What's the hole in them? Do you see the difference between the symptoms they show you and the hurt? And you know what's tragic in this? The world, expect us to judge them. It's amazing to me when I went to Harding, to the School of Biblical Studies, and I went to Harding, I didn't have an intent to be a preacher. And I know what you're thinking, well, good, you succeeded in that. I wanted to learn Bible, and I wanted to learn it. See, about junior high, I shut down. I went through junior high and high school, not really exploring my spirituality. And when I got about 20, I started having kind of a existential crisis of who am I and why am I here, which led to a tremendous spiritual revival, which led to a sense that man, I've really been behind. I've all that time I should have been learning, I wasn't paying attention, etc. So I want to make up for that. And in that process, went to Harding, had 125 semester hours of Bible and related classes in 2 years. It was an intense way to learn, and that's exactly what I wanted. Because I wanted to change my life in a positive way. Now, in that process, I discovered that I had something to say, and I discovered I had a voice to say it. But everything in my life changed. And I want you to know that had you met me before that, you might not have wanted to have anything to do with me. Because my agnostic period and all those kinds of things, I was asking questions that were blunt, that were not genteel, etc. But there was one man, Rex Dean, the Bible chair at college I was going to, Denton, Texas, what was used to be called North Texas State University. And I asked blunt, hard questions. He answered them with compassion, because he could look through and see the suffering, and he put that aside. And he put aside the critical questions I asked, divisive questions I asked, and he saw a guy that was hurting and searching. And I think he looked at me the way Jesus did. Put all the bluff aside, put all the junk aside, put all the hurt aside, put all the meanness, whatever you want to say, put all that aside. What's this guy's real problem? And it was very obvious. That's why I was there. That's why I was having this discussion with him. Because I was angry. I thought at God. I was hanging it out on him. And in the process, he saw someone that was searching, that was questioning. And those discussions started in just hours and hours and hours and hours of someone who looked past all the bluff and blunder and saw a person who was hurting, who was having an existential, spiritual crisis and didn't know it. And with patience, he slowly showed me that my problem was I knew there was a God, and I didn't love him. And I began to understand that he loved me regardless. And that couldn't help but draw my love for him. And so when I went to Harding, I wanted to learn as much about him as I could. I wanted to catch up. And in the process, I discovered I wanted to talk about him. Because he accepted me when I was unacceptable through someone who accepted me when I was unacceptable. Because he saw through all that unacceptability, and he saw a hurting human being created in the image of God. Can I be that? Can you be that? Brothers and sisters, sometimes we have to lay aside the symptoms and the lifestyle sins and look inside to see the hurt. And that leads to the question of, once I've come, my path has crossed somebody else's, how do I build a bridge with this person? With the woman at the well, it was water. It's all they had in common. How do I build a bridge with someone who's in a gay relationship? How do I build a bridge with someone who's an alcoholic? Paul said, I've come all things to all men. Was he afraid that they would accept that as enabling? No, because he had a purpose in doing that. It was to build a bridge, and the purpose wasn't to say, go your way, now we're friends. The purpose was to say, I want to show you someone that loves you, and I want to challenge you to try not to love him back. How do we build bridges? We ignore everything but the whole and understand it's just symptoms of that. Then we can relax, because we don't have to judge them. We don't have to judge how bad their sin is or how big the pile of sin is, because we can't. We don't have a small enough pile to be able to judge anybody else except for the grace of God. I didn't come to judge. I came to save. Guys, on that continuum of good to evil, we should be able to meet people on any part of that continuum. Because Jesus met you and me, and among all of us, we've all been one end to the other of that continuum. And he's loved us all, and we've loved him in return because we got away from judging and we came here to save. Have a great week. Have a great rest of your day, however much that there is. I've enjoyed this time in the study, as I've said, what it's helped me to discover. And I hope some of this is helpful to you, even though like this presentation, I'm not there yet. I'm not even there on, I presented this message before it's complete. The only reason I'm doing that is to try to get some discussion going. Take the outline, take the discussion questions, discuss them with your family. When do we go past compassion to enabling? And how do we get to set aside the symptoms of people's sin and look at their ultimate problem? And the ultimate problem is their separation from God. God be with us as we strive to grow and to be everything that he would have us be toward that end. I love you. Can't wait.